Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third and final edition of our Drive to Digital events in collaboration with Lloyds. We've got two excellent speakers for you today. First being Hannah from AccessPay, sales manager here, and Gavin, who's head of payments at Lloyds. I'm Luke, and I'll be your host for today. My role as partner manager at AccessPay means I get to work with Gavin to ensure that together our solutions can deliver a seamless experience for your payment and cash management needs. To set the scene, it probably helps to go back a few years, to look back to Brexit and then through COVID, both of which have undoubtedly shaped what we're seeing today as people move towards a hybrid way of working and a reliance on tech to be able to effectively work now more than ever. We then have the tragic events ongoing in Ukraine at the moment and an increase in the cost of living, which not only impacts our families and homes, but our businesses. Therefore, it is critical to have a cost-effective, robust, and advanced system in place to enable your businesses to operate. With so much change politically over the last few months, we can hope that things have finally settled a little bit and that some stability has returned. This makes the UK a more attractive place to do business than in recent times as the markets have reacted. Today, there is an accelerated regulatory focus and an across-the-board drive to digital. We have teamed up with Lloyds as together we're able to deliver efficiency, automation and control at a cost which is achievable for all. We're fortunate enough to have integrated many times over now, which enables us to take care of the technical side of things very easily as we understand the Lloyds security and format requirements, which enables you as the customer to be live with the solution much sooner than would otherwise be possible. And I'm sure you can't wait to hear more. We will hear about treasury transformation and how AccessPay can support you as you look to digitize and how APIs are on the rise and what role they can play in your payments and treasury journey. Gavin has some incredible products that Lloyds are able to offer that he can talk about and what is still to come. The aim is for this session to be interactive and there will be Slido questions and polls where you can vote and answer as they come onto your screen. Please access this by scanning the QR code that will appear when necessary. To kick off, I'm going to start by asking you a few questions so we can find out if it does actually work. Okay, get to the next one. Okay, what regions does your organisation cover? Is the first. Okay, still a few coming in. Okay, and what are your biggest challenges or objectives at the moment? And what technological advancements are you most keen on seeing? Okay, interesting results so far. Seems most people are keen on APIs and open banking. Okay, that's the end of the questions from me anyway. I really hope you find this session useful. So I'm now going to pass over to our speakers and Hannah to kick off, who's going to talk to you about what we call embedded corporate banking. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name's Hannah Davison. I'm one of the sales managers at AccessPay. I'll tell you a little bit more about AccessPay in just a few moments. But firstly, today I'm going to be talking to you about the fourth wave of banking and something that we call embedded corporate banking, and how this fourth wave is going to revolutionize the finance and treasury function. So throughout the session, I want you to have a think about how what I'm saying applies to the systems and processes that you have in place within your organization today, and how embedded your corporate banking processes are within the systems that you use. So again, we're going to be using the Slido throughout the session to ask for your input and build a picture of your kind of operational landscape today. So looking at the slide here, have a think about how many of you are using one of these tools within your finance function. My guess would be that actually most of you are using at least one of these applications as your accounting software or ERP or CRM, or a tool that you use to manage payments, from setting up suppliers, storing and processing invoices, and even perhaps creating payment runs. And I'd also bet that your organization has invested heavily in these systems as part of a digital transformation project designed to make your lives easier, your roles more efficient, and reduce the risk of error and fraud in the accounts payable process. So I think we've got our first Slido now of my session. So I think about what happens outside of these systems after a payment run has been created, and have a think about how do you currently connect your back office systems to the bank to make payments or retrieve statements. So we'll wait for a few of our answers to come through. Typically we find that it's lots of online banking portals, in-house solutions. There's a couple of different options on there. So we'll see what the results come in as. Okay. Most online banking portals so far. Probably what I was expecting. Okay, great. So by kind of landslide, I guess, we've got online banking portals as the most common method of connecting to your bank. A few of you have got kind of a combination of the above, so that's great to see. And actually, we've spent the last kind of 10 years speaking to accounts payable teams and working with over 1,000 customers to learn that actually the vast majority of finance functions operate in this way. So we see firsthand that in spite of having invested heavily in these transformative accounting solutions and ERPs, finance teams are still facing challenges of operating with hugely disconnected systems with a mix of bank portals, Excel spreadsheets, paper-based approvals, and extremely manual and labor-intensive processes, often involving tokens and lots of manual data entry. And now that might all well be, just about manageable if you've got one back office system and one bank to contend with. But as soon as multiple systems and multiple banks come into play, it can often be a recipe for disaster and cause wider problems than just inefficiency. So in speaking to our customers and our prospective customers about their current systems and processes, we've been able to distill down the key challenges that they're facing because of this setup into 4 main points. So the first one is increased risk, and that's risk of errors. So from the wrong amounts inputted to duplicate payments, increased risk of fraud from giving multiple users access to corporate bank accounts, and increased attempts to extort money through cybercrime. You've got to think about what happens when tokens get lost, what happens when staff are working remotely, and who's approving payments, and is this trail easily auditable? The second is time, cost, and morale. So the status quo isn't sustainable. All businesses are looking to grow. And whether you plan to do this organically or through acquisition, this approach really does lack scalability and means that costs will only go up. And equally, this mundane work is often cited as one of the main reasons that people leave the industry. The people in your teams are highly skilled and highly qualified, and it's demotivating to spend time doing kind of low-level data entry. Thirdly, we've got disparate systems. So many of the leading ERP systems and other finance applications actually lack the final step in the process, which is connecting to the bank. So businesses can spend millions on these projects and find that they're not as connected as they thought they'd be. And so they have to revert back to manually extracting data from ERPs and manually reconciling. And managing this at scale, especially when every bank accepts different file formats, gets complex quite quickly, and then staying compliant becomes increasingly challenging. And finally, there's a lack of visibility. So with no single source of truth, finance operations are often working with data that's days and sometimes weeks out of date. So that can mean that issues such as incorrect or stuck payments don't reach a supplier. That can then affect supply chain, to much larger implications of not having oversight of cash to make investment decisions. And there's actually been a lot of research done around this outside of our kind of anecdotal evidence as well. So there's some stats I'd like to share with you. Manual processes account for over 30% of account payable costs. By automating the payment process, a realistic time saving of 1.5 hours per day can equate to an annual saving of around just over £8,000, which obviously extrapolate that with the number of people involved in those processes, that can become quite a significant saving. The value of payment transfer fraud rose from 8.3 million in 2020 to 46.8 million in 2021. And 42% of PO invoices were paid on time when automated, while 25% were when not automated. So some interesting kind of food for thought there. So where does AccessPay fit into all of this? This is a quote from our CEO, Anish. Anish says that AccessPay are leading the 4th generation of finance transformation by connecting disparate systems and banks for an integrated, more efficient, more secure future of finance. So our vision has always been to help build and develop and support a world-class service that allows mid to large corporates to realise the numerous benefits of the 4th wave of corporate banking. And that's a service that we call embedded corporate banking. So what is the 4th wave of banking, you might ask? Well, think of it in terms of our experiences of banking as consumers. So the first wave of banking was using branches on the high street. Think back to 1694, if you can remember that far back. And And then the second wave, quite a lot later, then saw that second move to telephone-based banking in 1989. More recently and most revolutionary was the third wave, which saw banking become available online. And the fourth wave then sees digital being taken a step further again, where embedded banking connectivity is built into the applications that we use day to day. So we've got another Slido for you now. So which of these applications do you use in your daily life? So we've got things like payment solutions like Apple Pay, budget management apps like Snoop and Emma, and then app-first bank accounts like Chase, Monzo, Starling, all that good stuff. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer that. I'd be absolutely lost without Apple Pay, so that's definitely one of mine. Okay, great. So yeah, that's kind of what I was hoping. The vast majority of you are using at least one of those applications because as consumers, we're very much already there in the fourth wave. Consumer payment providers and banks are seamlessly connected to the point where frictionless transactions are taking place in the millions every minute. For example, paying for your taxi using Uber, ordering anything online, and even having oversight of all your bank accounts from within your Monzo or your Lloyds account or anything like that, while it serves up insights and analytics on your spending habits. But corporate banking hasn't quite caught up yet because we're kind of very much still stuck in the third wave. And that's really just because corporate banking is a lot more complex. It makes innovation much harder compared to kind of the modern retail banking. Most corporates don't have their banking embedded into their systems and they can't easily access financial products that they need to make important business decisions. But businesses are evolving very quickly, and access to banking services needs to adapt with them to continue to meet these needs. So AccessPay is here, leading the fourth wave of corporate banking and democratizing access to financial services for businesses. We empower finance and treasury teams with access to technology that takes the complexity out of business banking. So giving corporates the same experience that we as consumers have come to expect in our day-to-day lives. So this is kind of how you should be thinking about embedded corporate banking within your business. First of all, it starts with being connected. So that means one platform for domestic and international payments, collections, and transfers. Whether that's processing payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable, treasury, your team should be able to manage all of this in one centralized location. Secondly, automation allows corporates to experience loads of benefits because it reduces the time spent on those manual repetitive activities and frees the team up to focus on higher value tasks such as analysis and explanation of exceptions and trends. And that's actually going to ultimately boost morale across the team. Thirdly, embedded corporate banking is underpinned with security and control. So that means reduced risk of fraud and manual errors, while enabling you to demonstrate to your auditors that you've got the necessary controls in place to protect your business from fraud and cybercrime. And finally, embedded corporate banking gives you ultimate visibility, so into the status and progress and outcomes of all finance operations. delivering then real-time information and analysis to inform business decisions, while also being able to surface auditable processes with a complete data history of activity across your banks. And actually, embedded corporate banking is really achievable. And companies who are undergoing wider transformation projects, which probably take months, if not years, are actually embracing this now for a strong return on investment in the short term, so it can start impacting their business, next quarter. So this is what embedded corporate banking would look like if you were to implement a solution like AccessPay. Now, if any of you watching know AccessPay well, you've probably seen this diagram before, but this is actually how we would connect those back office systems directly to all of the banks and schemes that you need to connect to facilitate that automated flow of data and surface up that analytics and insights. So everything at the top is kind of what's going from your systems into the bank. So that's payments with fraud detection and file transformation and enrichment. And then everything at the bottom in purple is everything coming back from the bank, delivered back into your system. So that could be things like status reports, statements, balance information, balance reports, and then we can provide the analytics to kind of go alongside that. So I'm now going to share with you a few examples of how embedded banking has been implemented with 3 of AccessPay's customers to solve 3 different types of challenge. So we're going to use Slido again to get your views on how this resonates within your business. So our first challenge is, what challenges do you face with being multi-geographied and multi-banked? So we've got quite a few on there. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to answer again on the Slido. Lack of visibility is a key one. Visibility of cash, reporting, access management and control. Banking portals being in a foreign language is one that we do come across quite often. So yeah, give you a couple of seconds there. Yeah, obviously for some of you, this might not be applicable if you are just a UK-based organisation or you just kind of have one banking partner. Okay, so visibility of cash is coming up top in conjunction with that not being applicable. Oh, still going. Lack of visibility is coming in third. Cool. So yeah, this is kind of a common challenge that's faced with multi-geographied and multi-banked businesses. Like having that lack of visibility is something that we do find quite often, and it's something that we found with ITV. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with ITV, home to a few of our favourite TV shows. We all love a bit of Corrie and a bit of Love Island. And ITV are not only a local Manchester business, but also a completely global enterprise with multiple banks for about 300 entities across 10 different countries who, prior to working with AccessPay, were accessing these bank portals manually with separate logins, and they had a real lack of visibility across their regions. So with AccessPay, they were able to connect to every single one of these in one platform using the Swift network, which enabled them to meet strict security and compliance regulations that come with being a business of their size. So that protects them against fraud and error, and they're able to use tools such as data masking and encryption. Okay, so our next Slido. What are your regulatory pain points? Demonstrating control to mitigate risk. There are areas of my current process that aren't compliant, cost and time to be audit ready, and I'm not regulated, so I don't have any pain points. demonstrating control, currently taking the lead. Interesting to see that most of you are regulated in some way. Okay. Interesting, very interesting. So this is something that we come up against time and time again with lots of our regulated customers. As with most financial services organisations, Darlington Building Society are heavily regulated by the likes of the PRA, the FCA, and the EBA. So you might know that the PRA have actually mandated operational resilience for their financial services organisations by 2025. And Darlington actually acknowledged that their current process didn't meet these requirements for operational resilience because the manual process that they had in place using online banking portals meant that if their transaction volumes were to increase drastically, they didn't actually have the manpower to cope and process them all on time. So there's a huge amount of people risk in their process. So Darlington realised that they were unable to create the file format that was required by the bank to automate this process and upload that to the bank themselves. But with AccessPay, we were able to support them by doing that file transformation on their behalf, managing their connection to the bank, and enabling them to achieve compliance and meet that operational resilience target. Okay, so we've got our final Slido. What are the key drivers for your digital transformation journey? Quite a lot on here, so I won't read them all, but we've got, some of the biggies are supporting business growth, operational resilience is on there again, reducing headcount is that one. I'm interested to know if digital transformation is not on the agenda at all for anyone. Driving efficiency is obviously super key. Interesting. Lots of people looking to create efficiencies in their operations. Do we have anyone yet that's not looking to do digital transformation? Nope. It's good to see. Okay. So yeah, exactly what I was expecting to see there. Driving efficiency is really, really key. And there are very, very few organizations who are not looking to transform their processes in some way. Most businesses are on a digital transformation journey of some sort. So our final case study is with a customer who are a global research firm who conduct research by going out to experts in the industry, and then they basically pay them for their time, hence them having quite a high volume of payments that they need to make. And this business had identified at board level, probably like most of you, a need for a large ERP and finance transformation project. And part of that was upgrading their NetSuite solution and maximizing their investment in this area by enabling integrations with NetSuite, such as bank connections. They actually attempted to build a host-to-host connection in-house, alone, kind of without any support, but they quickly realized that was becoming quite a drain on resource, and that it wouldn't just be kind of a one-off resource requirement, but something that would be ongoing to manage and maintain and keep that updated with the change in file formats and things like that. So AccessPay were able to provide their bank connectivity, but also the knowledge and the expertise while working in partnership with their NetSuite consultant to support those digital transformation objectives. So I'm just going to leave you with some quotes from some of our other customers. Hopefully you've enjoyed my part of the session today. Looking forward to see what Gav has to say next. But yeah, I hope it's been food for thought. Thank you so much for attending and hope to speak to you all soon.
Okay, thanks very much, Hannah, for that. That's really insightful, and I'm now going to bring the conversation on slightly. So my name's Gavin McLean. I am a lifelong payments geek. I'm up here in Edinburgh today. That's actual Edinburgh Castle over my shoulder, not picture. And I'm now the head of cash management and payment products here at Lloyds. So what that means is that my day job is creating many of the payment products that help our clients to digitize, to simplify, to streamline, and to transform their customer journeys. Many of the things that Hannah was talking about and the reasons that Lloyds and AccessPay work together, many of those products are created in my business. We've heard already about how digitizing or the drive to digital can help organizations for many of those good reasons that Hannah mentioned. I'm going to build on that by looking at how businesses are embedding digital solutions into their journeys and into their propositions, and in particular, enabling two sort of macro mega trends that are going on at the moment, and that is self-service and real time. So let me talk a little bit more about those things just now. I'm going to focus particularly on one technology that is playing a key role in those embedded financial services and supporting self-service and real time, and that's the role of APIs. So if we move on a slide, for those who don't know what an API is, I'm going to give you my layman's understanding to get us all on the same page. So an API, application program interface, is essentially an agreement between one computer application and another to request and receive information or to initiate an action. So the example that you've got on screen just now is a person with a mobile banking app, and they want to know, or the app wants to display to them what the balance is on the bank account. So it calls an API service called, imaginatively, get balance. It provides a couple of variables into that data request. That's the account number that it wants the balance on and the date. And then the bank's system, subject to the right permissions and authorities, knows that the way it should respond to a get balance request is to provide these 4 bits of information in return. And that's the account number back, the date back, the balance of the account, and the currency in which that balance is held. So that's effectively what's going on when you hear about these API calls taking place. It's a request for information or to undertake an action, and it's a response by whatever system is responding to that API call to fulfill that contract. Now, API it's not actually a new technology. It's rising to prominence in the financial services world, but it's been around for a long time. And actually, APIs are all around us. So, for example, when you're on the BBC website and there's a little ticker that tells you the weather forecast for the day, the BBC site is not predicting the weather. What it's actually doing is it's making a call to the Met Office and the Met Office has got a system set up that if the right people come in and make the right call, they can be provided with the weather information. And then the BBC can render that into the BBC News page, just in the same way as a banking app could render the balance of the account into a statement view or a balance view or something like that. And there's other examples. When you go and look at Google to find out what the status of your flight is, whether it's delayed or not. Again, Google's not monitoring aviation traffic. It's simply calling probably NATS or something like that or the airline to get a status update on the status of that flight. So APIs are really all around us, and playing a part in providing information and services in our day-to-day lives. Now, we see them rising in prominence and rising in use, and there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, there's changes to society. So increasingly, people are using smartphones. Most of us have got one of these in our pocket. As consumers and businesses, we're increasingly expecting things to be digital, to be self-served, and to happen at a time and place of our choosing, not necessarily at our desk in our workplace or in our living rooms, but actually when we're out and about. So society is certainly changing and creating a need for these more real-time digital self-service experiences. Regulatory changes are also enabling competition and more services to be provided. And actually, some of the regulation in the financial services space recently has not only mandated certain policy outcomes to be achieved, like opening up markets, but actually it has mandated the use of the technology that should be used to do that. In recent cases, that has been APIs. So that's really driving a need for API deployment and utilization. There's certainly much more innovation out there linked to that sort of competition point. There is now new customer experiences that are possible, that are enabled by new technologies. So if you take things like API technology and cloud computing technology, where we've effectively got huge horsepower on demand in terms of processing, computer processing, that is. Actually, the combination of those two technologies is enabling customer experiences and journeys that just wouldn't have been possible even 5 or 10 years ago. And then there's the final point that life is getting more complex. We've now got big workforce changes. Luke mentioned the pandemic earlier on. We've got many more people working from home. I read a terrifying stat this week that there are around 40 apps on average on a smartphone. So much more of our complicated lives are being supported by digital technology, and API really is a good answer to many of those challenges. So let's look at some of the APIs or some of the services, the digital services that have been created. And I apologise for this being a very green Lloyds slide, but it's actually representative of what we see right across the industry. So some of the services that have been created, and I will come on to talk about how they've been deployed and how they're helping our clients. But very simply, things like event-driven notifications. So, for example, when a transaction occurs on an account or when a balance threshold is reached, an alert can be created and pushed to a business to tell them that that's happened. Confirmation of payee has been created in the UK and is accessible via an API, and that is to verify the account details of the person that you're about to send a payment to give you more certainty that actually who you think you're paying actually is the person that's going to receive that payment. Pay from bank is a solution built on the open banking rails. So that allows organisations to add open banking payment acceptance to the range of payment types that they accept. So that might be for, buying things online, it may be paying for goods, or it may be moving your money from your current account to a savings account, for example. And then finally, Pay2. And Pay2 is a API-based solution to allow the initiation of instant payments. So having a business's account debited and an instant faster payment remitted to a beneficiary. And actually, you can see an example journey on the right-hand side here, which conveniently, as you would expect, incorporates all of those services, and it's effectively a customer using an event notification to trigger a payout or a withdrawal from an investment account. So after the event trigger is hit, so for example, the investment reaches a particular value, a confirmation of payee check can be performed, and if that all checks out okay, then the Pay2 API can trigger an instant payment so that investor can receive the proceeds of their investment into their bank account in real time. And actually, the next time that a customer wants to top up their investment account or their trading account, they can use the open banking product to support that. So that's just an example of how some of the solutions that have been enabled by API can actually be embedded into existing customer journeys to allow the finance or the financial part of that journey to happen in real time, happen in the digital context, and as I said before, happen in a largely self-service environment where no human interaction is required. But actually, as well as our own products and our own client experience, we can also look ahead at some industry statistics to see the prominence of of API technology. And I've used here open banking. So open banking is an example of one of these regulatory changes that not only sought to open up the market, but actually also said that APIs would be the underlying technology between the banks and the other participants in the market that would enable all of this to happen. And actually what we can see on the sort of latest publicly available information is that the number of transactions that are happening is growing. There are now hundreds of millions of API calls happening every month. If we include things like the confirmation of payee checks that are going on all day, every day, then we really are into the hundreds of millions of transactions. And it's really starting to become mainstream. So AccessPay, our hosts today, enable open banking account information aggregation. MBNA, and I must say other credit card brands are available, but MBNA, which is part of Lloyds Group, allows open banking transactions to be used for the repayment of a credit card balance, for example. Revolut, when you want to send an international payment, now rather than pushing a payment to Revolut for the domestic funding leg of that transaction, actually that is all now embedded in the Revolut payment transfer and supported by open banking. And indeed, if you want to book a flight on KLM, as well as being able to use your debit card and credit card and PayPal and things like that, actually paying from your bank account using an open banking payment type is an option there as well. So we can really see that it's beginning to become mainstream, and it's really sort of coming to prominence in our everyday lives. And I think that's a trend that's probably only going to continue. If we can move on to the next slide. I've sort of hopefully started to persuade you that APIs can really meet the needs where you've got a journey that needs to be real time and digital, and have the financial transaction element of it really embedded into the main customer journey. But I do also need to say, to manage some expectations that they just don't fit everywhere. So on this spectrum, you can see that they're highly effective for things like real-time information requests, for instant receipt of funds, for instant payment of funds. They work really, really well. But actually, you know, if you've got the payroll working perfectly well on a monthly 3-day cycle, don't change it. If your accounts payable process is a well-oiled machine and there's no need for it to become instant and digital, then don't try and force it. And if things like your recurring payment collections using direct debits, for example, is working well, again, you know, find the right place for an API to improve a journey. You don't need to have a cool API program. You know, you don't need a blockchain program. You don't need a cloud program. You don't need an API program unless you actually need an API program. So I would encourage you to be thoughtful and selective about where the opportunities exist to deploy API technology, if at all. Okay, so let's move on. So just thinking about the, sorry, can we have the next slide, please? So thinking about some of those interactions, some of those journeys where real-time and self-service and digital will help. Have a think about what processes in your business might potentially benefit from the use of API technology. Where have you got things happening in your organisation that could be doing with being more self-serve, more digital, more embedded into the journey and more real time? And as I say, you know, without seeking to lead the witness, that they're not applicable to all cases. So if that's the case, then you know, you don't need to provide a response to this just because you feel like you've got to have a cool API program. Okay, so REX, payment acceptance, which is probably open banking. Yeah, REX, which I presume is more the kind of event notification type solutions to prompt you that something's happened rather than having to go in and repeatedly check account reports and things like that. Okay, so a bit like Hannah, those are probably the types of responses that we would have been accepting. What I will say, however, is that this is some insight as to where our customers at Lloyds have deployed some of those services and some of those API technologies. So, you know, for the accepting of rent payments, particularly in that case, student accommodation. So where somebody wants to pay a deposit or pay rent up front for student accommodation, the open banking payment acceptance has worked really, really well there. In the case of making payments, that's been employed really successfully by some organisations who have wanted to allow early wage access. So to allow employees to access some of their earned pay before payday. So for example, healthcare workers who are maybe working for contract agencies and want to receive payment for that work at the end of the shift or after 2 or 3 shifts, an instant payments API, the Pay To API that I showed earlier, is a good way of initiating that payment and getting the funds to the healthcare worker instantly. It's also been used, the open banking, as I say, has been used really successfully for moving money to credit card balances or topping up your savings account or your ISA. There's a number of investment platforms now offer open banking transactions as a way of funding your savings, as well as traditional bank transfers. And then on the event-driven notifications, we've seen a number of customers use those event notifications to trigger other processes. So that might be the dispatch of goods, the completion of a contract, but effectively using that notification to drive or to trigger the next step in the process. And then, of course, the confirmation of payee API has been really useful for our customers to confirm the details of payees. So, for example, when they've onboarded a new member of staff or a new supplier, being able to do that confirmation check gives them reassurance that they are making payments to the right place. And look, there's a little bit here on what might be the future. So I think rather than revolution, I think we're probably going to see an evolution of some of the services that are already making a difference out in the real world. So I think our open banking will see a refund button being created so that we can effectively reverse any transactions that need to be reversed. I think there will be further enhancements of things like event notifications. So I think the range of events that may be capable of being notified will probably expand as well. And then I think probably the open banking solutions will be more often used not just to do spontaneous one-off payments, but actually to do recurring payments and, a prompt for payment. So, for example, a button at the bottom of an invoice that allows somebody to pay that invoice using an open banking transaction. I could easily imagine some of those use cases emerging. So hopefully that's given you some, if not inspiration, at least some ideas as to where other organisations are finding success and finding good use cases for these types of solutions in what is undoubtedly an increasingly digital world. And so to conclude, look, I would just leave you with the thought that drive to digital is really happening. APIs are supporting that drive because they're really a good fit for those digital, self-serve, real-time embedded journeys. That is becoming mainstream. In the future, it will be as likely to have your financial transactions supported by APIs as it will be to check the weather on the BBC app or website. But as I say, candidly, you don't need to have a cool API project unless you need to have a cool API project. If there's a use case that you see fitting in your business, then go for it. Don't feel the need to API the life out of your salary process if it's been working well for the last 2 or 3 decades. And if you do need help, then I'm sure the guys at AccessPay would make themselves available. And equally, if you need help from Lloyds with any of these opportunities, then get in touch with me or your normal Lloyds cash management and payments specialist. And I think with that, that's the end of my content, and we're now going to move to Q&A. And I think Luke and Hannah are probably going to come back into the picture at this point so that we can work through the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Gav. Still waiting on Hannah. Here she is. So thank you to both of you. I hope our audience found that enjoyable and insightful. I know I certainly did. We're going to move on to the questions. We have a few, but please do keep them coming in if you're on LinkedIn or on the stream, and we'll get round to you. I think we'll start with. Okay, we've got the same question twice, so we'll start with: will embedded banking solve connection to your service to improve options for faster payment processes for any bank in the UK? Hannah, we'll go to you. This is through Slido. So, what benefit would a corporate get from using an AccessPay to connect to a bank? I think really is a question here.
Yeah, sure. And the answer is yes, it absolutely would help with faster payments. Obviously, one of the key challenges that businesses face is that most of the time faster payments are only enabled using an online bank portal, and so that it naturally means if you are using maybe a BACS provider but you still want to make faster payments, then you are having to manage disparate systems. With using like an AccessPay type solution, that means you can kind of combine that all into one platform so that faster payments, BACS, CHAPS, SEPA, cross-border, anything can kind of flow through one unified interface, and that can be via multiple bank partners.
Great, thank you. And we'll stick with you, Hannah. How could this support working with PSPs and merchants to make it easier to collect money as well as make payments? So talking about collections here.
Yeah, so I guess from an AccessPay perspective, there's two means for that. So obviously facilitating direct debit collections, whether that be BACS direct debits or SEPA direct debits, and also with the reconciliation of collections as well. So actually receiving statement data, actually being able to pass that data then through to accounting platforms for reconciliation of receivables. So yeah.
Sure, thank you. And I think Gavin had a comment to make maybe about the previous question. If you want to
probably both actually, Luke, just to give a perspective. So I think, look, most of the banks offer faster payment initiation through their direct connectivity, their host-to-host type services that the likes of AccessPay have integrated to. Lloyds are now supporting faster payment initiation via API, as I mentioned earlier on. And actually, we're going through the work with AccessPay right now to integrate the APIs into that. So in the future, as well as the traditional sort of file-based payment initiation, you will have that genuine real-time optionality there as well. And I can't speak for the whole industry, but I saw an announcement only yesterday that one of the other big four banks in the UK is now allowing faster payment initiation using an API. So my expectation would be that AccessPay and other organisations that do things like AccessPay in the market will probably integrate into those patterns as well. And then whether you're a corporate wanting to do file-based upload on a regular cycle, or whether you're wanting to do genuine real-time payment processing, I think both of those options will become much more prominent. I think the question about merchants and payments and that sort of stuff, and the use of the words merchants and third-party providers made me think that might be related to the open banking ecosystem. So far at Lloyds, all of our integrations of the open banking products has been one-to-one with a customer, right? So we've done the integration with the airline, we've done the integration with the wealth management platform or the investment platform. What's actually starting to happen now, certainly at Lloyds, and I sense probably across the broader industry, is that those open banking payment acceptance products are actually being embedded into payment gateway technology, so that you would get from your acquirer typically. So just like your gateway can allow you to accept Visa, MasterCard, Amex, JCB, China Union Pay, and lots of different payment schemes, one of the buttons that will emerge to be enabled will become an open banking payment acceptance. So I think when those technologies get embedded into the payment gateways, that will just increase the more mainstream nature, because a corporate won't have to do their own implementation. They'll be able to access that capability through the payment gateway that in all probability they're already using.
Great, thanks Gav, that's really helpful. And another one for you, as it touches on banks. With instant receipt of funds, can this be possible for North American banks paying a UK account? So cross-border.
Yes, it can. So again, a Lloyds solution rather than a whole of market solution here, but we've enabled access to the UK faster payment scheme from our international partner banks around the world. So that would be certainly North America, but also all other parts of the world too. And what we've enabled is the foreign bank to initiate a standard SWIFT instruction, which they are very familiar doing today. And we'll then take that and execute an instant faster payment in the UK. And what we'll also do for the other payment geeks among you, because there may be many in our number, what we'll also do is at the conclusion of that payment, we'll update something which is known as the GPI tracker, which the sending bank can then use and access to determine the fate of that payment. So it's not a sort of US to UK fire and forget. It's a US to UK payment processed and then confirmation sent back to the sender in the US. So if that's my Auntie Flo sending me my £100 for my birthday, as she does every year, Auntie Flo will discover that payment has not only been processed by her bank, but actually that it's reached me as well. So yeah, I think that'll be a trend over the coming years, is joining up the instant payment networks that exist in lots of different countries around the world, so that, you know, a UK citizen sending money to Australia or an Australian citizen sending money to Canada, that can happen instantly cross-border, as we're all used to it happening instantly domestic today.
Great, thank you. And the next one here is from Anonymous. It's, does your platform integrate directly with Microsoft Dynamics Business Central? Yes, it absolutely does, and we've done it many times before. So if you'd like to make yourself known afterwards, we can certainly have a chat about that one and see how we can help you. Which banks support open banking today, and is there a list? Gav, you might want to touch on this one, but I think there's a pretty vast number of banks that are supporting it, right?
Yeah, so the initial open banking order was issued by the Competition and Markets Authority, and it focused on the 9 biggest banks in the UK. So, you know, you can well imagine who the 9 largest banks were at that time. That has been extended by some regulation known as Payment Services Directive 2, which came out of Brussels, and that has extended it to all intents and purposes, every account servicing bank. So there should really be, certainly in the UK, there should be no challenges of if you want to enable open banking payment acceptance, you shouldn't be finding large subsets of your customers that are out of reach or unable to access that type of service. And there's certainly a list available. We can share that information after the call today.
Great, thanks. And that kind of brings us to an end of the questions that have come in so far. So I don't know if there's any further points that either Gav or Hannah would like to make.
Just to say thank you. Just to say thank you for everybody who attended, who responded to the Slido, who's asked a question. It's really insightful to get kind of that input as well, and we'll definitely be sharing the results that we've kind of collated in the number of presentations that we've done using the Slido. We might actually kind of create a bit of a report that we can share with everybody to show some of the trends that we're seeing in the market at the moment. Great,
thanks Hannah. And anything further from you, Gav?
Exactly what Hannah said.
Brilliant. Perfect. Okay, so I guess we'll draw it to a close. And from me, a massive thank you to everyone that's joined, and a massive thank you to Hannah and Gav for taking the time out of their morning to come and be with us today. I guess we'll leave it there. If there's any questions, you can reach out to Gav. His details were on one of his slides. And any questions for an AccessPay solution, we're always available online, and Hannah's details are available, I think, or LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thanks.